So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things in the Don Passman book that were there, and try to illuminate them some more, or highlight some things that I think are important. Number one, domestic and foreign royalties on records are calculated different. You'll find that the calculations, I mean, as you've read this book, no doubt you've kind of gone, oh my goodness, look at what they subtract. But your foreign royalties are going to be less than your domestic royalties on records. They just are, because there are additional costs, and a lot of times the record company has a foreign partner that has to get a cut. So just be aware of that. Same thing actually happens in publishing, which we'll be talking about in the next module. But you just need to be aware of that domestic and foreign royalties are calculated at different rates. The next thing is reserve limitations. Okay, so you want to limit how much money the record company can hold back. And this really applies to CD sales. So this is kind of going away. But in the days where you had a lot of breakage with records, or you would ship out a whole bunch of records and whatever wasn't sold was sent back to the record company for full credit, the record company would hold back from the artist, hold in reserve their royalties, so that they didn't find themselves, they ship it out there and they ship 500,000 units, and then 499,000 of them come back from record stores, and they've already paid you royalties on 500,000 records. So they would hold back just in case what they shipped out didn't sell. So that was the idea behind reserve limitations, and they can hold that back for a good period of time, 6 months, year and a half. So you want to make sure that that number is low. So that's one of the things. Master's license. There are 2 licenses whenever somebody wants to use a piece of recorded music in a TV show, film, commercial, any other possible use that can come up. And one is called the master license, and it refers to the recording. Okay? The recording is a master license. Your mastered record, your mastered single, your mastered song. A master. There's another one called a sync license. When you hear the word sync, think publishing. Think the underlying song rights. Totally different, totally separate, but I want you to understand, and I'll stress this as well when we get into the publishing side, master licenses are for the master recordings. So just keep that straight. It can be a difficult concept to get, but get it. Next, TV advertising of albums pretty much doesn't happen unless you're a big star and it's the Grammys or a big award show. That's about the only time you see it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it that way. So you see internet advertising, you see mostly the way that records are promoted is by getting it out there in some way so it can be heard. Spotify or broadcast radio or somewhere on the internet, some other thing. So TV advertising is not something you see a lot, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Next thing is greatest hits records. It used to be a standard thing that you would sign a 7-record deal. You do your first 3 records, and then the 4th record was a greatest hits. Sometimes the 3rd, but normally the 4th, and you'd have a couple of extra songs on there that weren't released on the others, so you had a single to drive. And it was for the artist, a lot of times it was a chance to breathe. It was a chance to not feel the pressure to have to write or record a whole bunch of other songs. And for the record company, because their costs are lower, because they don't have to produce as many songs, it was kind of just a money machine. So, but now, since people are buying single songs, the whole greatest hit album concept is kind of gone. So, how that is reflected in record deals now, we'll just have to see. But it used to be the greatest hits was, you'd have 7 albums and maybe 1, maybe 2 of those were greatest hits, or one was a greatest hit, one that was a Christmas album or something. Some other things. So depending on your genre and what you're doing. But anyway, that's that. Cut out scraps. When you produced a run of records and those records were returned from the stores, they'd sit in a warehouse. And what do? You either destroy them, throw them in the trash, recycle them, or you sell them at a discount. And that's what cutouts are. So a lot of times you go to Walmart or whatever, you pick up a CD and you'll see a hole drilled through the plastic on that. It was called a cutout because they used to cut a notch in the cardboard on an album, on a record, in the corner. And that's how you could tell what a cutout was. And so they've just kept that term. But that is disappearing as well with digital sales. You don't have scraps. You don't have returned albums and things. So anyway, so that's changing. So understanding that terminology. Accounting is limited time to challenge. You only have up to, I believe it's 2 years in most contracts to challenge the accounting on a record. So you have to be, if you want to challenge and it's very expensive to audit, then you have to do that within a specified period of time. Then a couple other things. Videos. It's very rare that you can force a record company to shoot a video on a song. Record companies used to spend $100,000 to $150,000 or more on a video. Now you're lucky if they'll give you 20. And a lot of times it's not as necessary. I mean, you can go out and shoot stuff and you'll see stuff that's shot by Lord and some of the other artists that are out there now, and it's not very expensive. The videos aren't expensive. Independent promotion. This was a tool used by the record companies where they didn't use their internal radio promotion people. They would go out and hire other people who had relationships with radio stations and pay them money to go pimp the song to the radio conglomerates. That is waning now. A big part of independent promotion used to be that's where payola was done. The record companies could hand the money to somebody else and say, "Hey, go promote this record," and if they would give money to the people who chose the music or give them gifts or do something, the record company could go, "Oh, wow, we didn't know about that," and so they get away with it. So independent promotion is just going outside of the record label's own staff and hiring companies that have relationships. Next thing, tour support. Tour support on the major label deals, it's something that you want to get in an artist contract if you can possibly do it. With the record companies, they're always going to have the final decision, but you can't, you're not going to make money on a tour in the beginning. Even if you're out on a big tour and you're an opening act, you're not making enough money from what you're getting paid to cover all your expenses. So having tour support where the record company makes up the difference between what the big act is paying you and what you're receiving or what your expenses are, that's considered tour support. So you can find yourself going out on tour, on a big tour for 6 months or a year, and basically finding yourself in debt to your label by an increased amount of money. So that's what that is. And also know that that there are musicians union, singers unions, and those people need to be paid on your records if you're dealing with a major label. They're all signatories to the union agreements, and it's very important that you stay on top of that and make those payments if you're dealing with that. So you need to be aware that there are unions involved, and that means that you're not just paying people, $100 to play on a record. You're also paying them pension and welfare, health and welfare money, and that those musicians are also paying union dues and work dues, a percentage of what they make back to the union for what the union does. So let me see what else we got here. Oh, creative and marketing and other controls. If you're not going to have a chance to make these decisions as far as the creative direction of a record or the marketing of your record, you have input. But if you think you're going to get a chance to choose, this is going to be the single, or this is what we're going to push, or yes, all these songs are great and I want them released, That's not the way it works. Almost all those decisions lie in the contract with the record company. You get to consult. That's just the way that is. Loan out corporations. A lot of artists have loan out corporations, and they can be for touring. And this is all, it's a liability issue more than anything else. So if you're touring and your bus, your bus driver hits somebody, the person who's injured is going to sue the deepest pocket, which is most of the time, it's not going to be the bus driver. They're going to sue the artist who contracted the bus or owns the bus. And so by having a separate touring company, they cannot touch, for instance, they can't touch your publishing royalties or your record royalties or any other money, or take your house or your car or anything that you own personally, because you run your touring money strictly through this touring company. So if they sue, and they can win, then they get the money from the touring company. Of course, you'd have insurance, but you get the money from the touring company and not the other. And then the other issue, and sometimes songwriters, successful songwriters, have they have a loan out corporation or an LLC, limited liability company, and they run all their royalties through those companies, and that is protected. So in case somebody says, "Hey, you stole my song, you ripped it off," that you're protected, that then they can't come after your house, your car, your kids' money. They can only go after what the assets of that company. And if you're smart, you keep very little in the company. The money flows through the company, and then you're paid a salary, and they can't come after you for that salary. They can only come after the assets of the company. And then there are independent production deals, which are different. So rather than the record company directly contracting with you and with the producer to produce the record, there's a company that produces a record on you and then takes it to a major label and gets you a deal, and then they get a percentage of the overall deal. So it's kind of a strange thing, because you're now, sometimes the independent production company will just hand it off to the record company. Other times there is kind of a joint venture. So you have, and this happens a lot in the rap world and the pop world, where you may have a Dr. Luke or something like that who has their own imprint. They have their own record label within a major label. And so in that case, they are producing records, they are doing all that stuff. The major label, though, is the one that handles distribution, is the one that handles marketing, is the one that handles radio promotion. And so basically it's a way for a producer to have a little bit more creative control. The record company gives them a little more creative control, and hopefully the artist gets a little more creative control in that mix as well. But that you kind of have two masters in that case. You're signed by this producer person, and then you got a record company that you're also dealing with as well. So depending on how solid their relationship is, it can make things extremely complicated, as I think you're finding out by reading this book. So that's all for this module.